I am super excited and delighted and honored to be here tonight to talk to you about the transformational journey of Agile. I don't like agendas. Agendas are too stodgy for me. I like goals. And my goals for tonight are threefold. It's to answer these three questions. What is Agile? What is the power and value of Agile to the business? In other words, why does it work? And how do you transform a team to becoming agile efficiently and effectively? To do that, I'd like to start tonight's talk by describing for you some realities that we face in business. And in order to do that, I'm going to walk you through a cartoon. It's a very famous cartoon. Perhaps you have seen it. But it illustrates business reality so beautifully that I just have to share it with you. And it's titled, How Do Projects Really Work? So here's the first panel. How the customer explained it. So the customer has a product that they want from you, a piece of software or any kind of product. And this is what they told you they wanted, this swing with 3 seats. This is how the project leader understood it. How many of you have seen this, by the way? Okay. This is how the analyst designed it. This is how the programmer wrote it. This is how the business consultant, the high-paid Deloitte, Ernst & Young, described it. This next one is my favorite. This is how it was documented. This is what operations installed. Actually, this is my favorite. How the customer was billed. No, actually, this is my favorite. How it was supported. And then in the end, what the customer really needed. So you'll notice that even what the customer needed, the customer could not actually explain. Every single project that I've been involved in the 20 years that I've been working in the industry, any project of any significance, involves some or all of these panels without exception. This happens all the time. You're trying to build a product, and this is all the things that happen on the way to delivering to the market. So it is fraught with risk and fraught with danger. But this is how projects really work. I'm going to show you another cartoon that you may have seen. On the left is what the client was told they could get, Life of Pi, a tiger. On the right is what the client actually has the budget for. This happens all the time. So let me tell you a little bit about me in 3 quick, easy slides. I started my professional life as a C Windows 3.1 programmer at Reuters. Windows 3.1, for those of you that don't know, makes Windows 7 look like Star Trek. I've worked at IBM for 4 years. I worked at Charles Schwab as Director of Software Development, did a bunch of financial services projects there. I worked at Deluxe, running their business systems, and I'm currently Vice President of Engineering, Software Engineering at Walt Disney Studios. If you've watched Frozen or Captain America in the movie theaters, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. These companies and other companies are where I had the real life lessons and where I gained the experience that I'm sharing with you this evening. So I started my life in New York, born and bred in New York, and after about 30 years there, decided to go west, young man, and ended up in the Bay Area. I was in the Bay Area for 10 years, most of my time there at Charles Schwab. And 5 years ago, I decided to come down to sunny Southern California and have loved it ever since. Finally, I have 3 passions, as Vandana mentioned. I love chocolate and dessert making. These are cakes that I've made for my kids, actual cakes. They're all chocolate cakes. You're probably asking yourselves, what do these cakes have to do with Agile? And I will answer that later in the talk. I have a passion for mentoring, and I'll be plugging that later on. And I have a passion for Agile, which is what we're talking about today. So let's get back to that. For me to answer the question of what is Agile, I want to take you back to 20, 30 years ago when the computer science industry, computer software industry was relatively young. In fact, if you think of all engineering disciplines, computer engineering, computer science is an extremely young, I mean, if you compare it to electrical engineering or even construction has been around for thousands of years. We're a little infant, we're a little toddler when it comes to an engineering discipline. And what was prevalent at the time, not sure when it actually started, but it was codified in a book around 1970, was a software development methodology known as waterfall. Have people heard of waterfall? Just curious. Okay, fantastic. So I can just do a couple sentences. Waterfall was how we did software for decades. You got all your requirements at the beginning. The customer explained what they wanted, gave it over to the developers, they designed it, they implemented, they verified it, and they said, here it is, 6 months, a year, 18 months later. And that was fine, except it didn't work very well. So in 2001, 12 luminaries in the industry got together and said, we've been doing computer software for 20, 30 years now. A lot of things aren't working. So they said, what can we do? What best practices can we extract from what we've learned in the last 20 years? And what are we doing wrong? And why doesn't this work? Why are projects always overrunning time, overrunning budget? Waterfall doesn't seem to be working. So they came up with the Agile Manifesto. It's 12 principles. You do not have to read these principles. I'm going to highlight the key ones in a second. I just wanted, for completeness, for you to see them. They came with these 12 principles that codified what they felt worked in developing software. So I'm going to highlight a few of these. The very first principle in Agile is our highest priority is to satisfy the customer. It seems obvious, right? You wouldn't be in business unless you can satisfy the customer. But you would be surprised if you're in business for 6 months or a year, how easy it is to lose sight of the customer. Whether it's people who are unbelievably focused on the budget or timelines, so they cut corners to the negative impact of the customer, whether people have personal agendas for whatever reason. Very easy, unfortunately, to lose sight of the customer. Think of the last bad product you've had to deal with or bad service. That's a company that's probably lost sight of you and your needs. Agile says this is our number one highest priority. The next key principle I want to highlight is that Agile welcomes changing requirements, even late in the game. This is revolutionary, especially when you think back to 2001. Generally, when you develop software, when you develop any product, you want to know what you're doing, you want to go build it, and then you want to be left alone, and you want to come back and say, here it is, and you want everybody to be happy and buy it and make you very successful. You don't want any changes. Change is painful, change is bad. Agile actually turns that on its head. Not only does Agile tolerate change, it expects change and welcomes change throughout the process. And I'll explain why that works in a little bit. The third key principle of the 12 I want to highlight is to deliver working software frequently. Now, just as an aside, Agile is a software development methodology, and I'm a software guy. But a lot of these principles, I feel, apply very well, very strongly to any kind of product development. There are principles in here. So whenever you see software in any of these principles, you can substitute it with proof of concept or product. A lot of these principles apply equally well for any kind of product development. Deliver frequently from within a couple of weeks to a couple of months. The next key principle I want to highlight is that working software or a working product or a working prototype is the primary measure of progress. It seems obvious. This is the best of the principles in my opinion, but it's actually not. You have a lot of salespeople telling you, don't worry, the product is working, we're almost there. No, 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 no. Unless you can actually show it working, demonstrate it, that's actually the best measure that you're progressing towards your goal. The next key principle in Agile is that the best architectures, the best requirements, and the best designs, the best work product, emerge from self-organizing teams. This is also quite striking at the time that it was highlighted. In 2001 and before, big companies, bureaucracies are very command and control. There is a protocol. You talk to your manager, and the manager talks to that manager. What Agile says is, you get a team together, and you leave them alone. You empower them to make decisions. You incent them to say that, you incent them with these principles and say, the delighting the customer is the number one thing you have to do. And you leave them alone. And the best work product comes from self-empowered, self-organizing teams. And the last principle in Agile that I would like to highlight is, at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become better. Agile is about continuous improvement. So, to learn Agile, you could take a course, a 2-day course. That's the minimum that it takes. I'm going to compress for you a 2-day course into 4 minutes. Just 4 minutes. You don't need to become Agile experts. Okay? If you get a sense, once I describe these Agile processes, or what we call ceremonies, if you get a sense that these ceremonies engender and incent transparency in the development cycle, collaboration, commitment, and continuous improvement. If you get a connection to that from when I describe what these processes are, I would have succeeded in the next 4 minutes. Okay? So there are 4 key ceremonies in Agile processes. The first one is sprint planning. The second one is the daily stand-up. The third one is the demo. And the fourth one is the retrospective. There's a lot more, but this is the 4 most important ones. First, let's define what a sprint is before I describe what those ceremonies are. An Agile sprint is a time-boxed iteration in which you build something. To give you a real-world example, are you familiar with Habitat for Humanity? Okay. They get together and they build houses for underprivileged people, right? What do? They get a team of people, and in a week, they build a house and hand the keys off to somebody, right? So they get a group of people together, they say, okay, you do the framing, and you do the painting, and you do the electrical, and you do the plumbing, and then show it off. That make sense? Okay. So with that definition, let's talk about the first key Agile ceremony, which is sprint planning. This is the meeting that the team defines what they're going to do in that sprint, in that time-boxed amount of time. And they work on it based on highest business value first. So as time moves on, the team is working on what matters to the customer most first. And they commit to what they're going to deliver in that period of time. And the sprint planning is the process by which they decide how they're going to do that in that 2 weeks time frame. The next ceremony is the daily stand-up. Daily stand-up is what a team does. They get together for 15 minutes. It is not a status meeting. It is not a status meeting. That's what you get in all the other methodologies. In Agile, everybody gets around. They don't sit down. This is not my team, but I think it's a very good, very nice example of how it looks. They get together and they answer 3 questions. What did I do in the last 24 hours? What am I committing to do in the next 24 hours? And they are making a commitment. They're making a commitment to each other in as much as they're making a commitment to the business. That this is what they're going to do in the next 24 hours. And the third question is, what are my blockers? What's keeping me from making my commitments to you? That way they can get resolved. And for those folks that have blockers, and for those folks on the team that can help resolve those blockers, they stick around after the 15 minutes to help resolve them. Everybody else goes away and goes back to work. The third Agile ceremony is the sprint demo. This is where the team gets to show off what they've built. And it's not just to show off, it's to get feedback. So after 2 weeks, they've made their commitments, they've built something, they show it off, and then they ask the business, did we get it right? Did we understand what you were saying? Did we get it wrong? Let's fix it in the next sprint. Did we get it right, and did you change your mind? Because sometimes, if those of you who have worked in the working world, your customer will change their minds. They'll change their minds because they have something to react to. You've built a product that can now react to and play with them like, oh, I thought I wanted the play button here, but that's terrible. I actually want it here. Or the market has changed. The business context has changed. This gives the team an opportunity to course correct. The last ceremony is the sprint retrospective. So you've planned, you've built, you've demoed, you've taken the feedback from the business. Now the team gets together and openly discusses what went right in the last couple of weeks. What did we do right so we can make sure to continue that? What did we do wrong? What made us unhappy? And how do we fix it? What ideas do I have? The concept of innovation is very important in Agile. We want to be explicit about allowing people to have ideas and have that get incorporated as part of the feedback for the next sprints. And finally, who should I thank? There's a tremendous element of gratitude in Agile. In every sprint, somebody has gone and done something above and beyond. I have one Agile team, they vote for MVP, who's the most valuable player, who really knocked it out of the park. And you honor them and you thank them. And that makes people feel good. They want to be the MVP next time. They're gonna make their commitments. That's it. That's Agile in a nutshell. So again, if you got a sense that the ceremonies provide an opportunity, not provide an opportunity, demand transparency, demand commitment, and have feedback about continuous improvement, that's all you need to know from that first part. Okay. So that's what Agile is in a nutshell. The next part is, why does it work? Why is this a good thing? To do that, I want to tell you why the other approaches do not work. So can anyone tell me, what is a typical way that projects get tracked? How do you plan and track? Go ahead.
Status reports.
Status reports. Very good. What else? Okay. Timelines, Gantt charts, exactly. Project plans. Beautiful Gantt charts. You know what the problem is with this? The way a project plan works is a very good project manager will get together and say, okay, we have to build this thing. And there's 150 tasks, okay, and we have a team. Okay, so Gil is going to do this, and Fred is going to do this, and Wayne is going to do that, and Mary's going to do this, but Mary can't do it until Wayne finishes his piece. So there's a dependency, and they build this beautiful project plan that goes out a year. And they say, okay, I know what you're going to be doing a year from now. You're going to be working on this task for 4 days. Really? Do you know anyone that can, you can't even know what you're going to do next month. And yet project plans in black and white tell the business, I know what this person is going to be doing in a year. And it just doesn't work. The problem with these other methodologies, such as waterfall, these are waterfall project plans, is that they give the illusion of certainty. And the illusion of certainty is very, very dangerous when you're doing product development. It doesn't work. Other product development methodologies, such as waterfall, are based on 4 assumptions that are all false. And I'm going to share those with you right now. The first one is that all the necessary decisions to build a product can be made in one requirements time period by business people who don't know how to build the product. Right? So people have business context. They don't know how to build product, they don't know how to build software, but they know what the customer wants, and they can decide and know everything that they want in one period. That's rarely true. The second false assumption is that those requirements can go in one fell swoop to people who know how to build a product, but have very little idea of the business. I mean, sometimes software developers know the business, but rarely do they actually know the business. So the second assumption is all these requirements that were created all at once can be transferred flawlessly to software developers that have no business context. That's also false. The third false assumption is that the marketplace, the business context in which those initial requirements were created, will not change. That's unbelievably false. In today's digital media, social media world, when a tweet can make a company almost bankrupt or soar on the NASDAQ, your business landscape is changing every second. Things like waterfall that have, methodologies like waterfall that have the product development folks go off for a year, have assumption that things are not going to change or not change very much. And the fourth brings me to the fourth false assumption, that the changes that invariably come, because they do come, to those requirements can be handled within the original time frame of the project. So if you had 18 months and the business has changed their minds, you can handle any changes within that time frame. False. This is all about the illusion of certainty. So why does Agile work? Because Agile has a different set of assumptions. The first assumption is that Agile assumes that customers do not have all the requirements up front and all at once. That's baked in. We know that when the customer comes, they're very sincere. Yes, they want this, but we know, and they know, they're going to change their minds. The second idea in Agile is that Agile assumes that change is constant. Therefore, if you deliver in small increments, you can track the change infinitely better than if you go off for 18 months. The third key item in Agile is that sprint demos help ensure the team understands what the requirements are in the first place and allows for course correction. And the fourth, Agile delivers the highest business value first. So if your customer or your business partners see that the landscape is changing and they need to respond and they need to ship something now, not in 9 months, now, they have something to ship that is viable because you've built the most important things first. The thing about Agile is that it is all about the acceptance of uncertainty. So let's look at some studies. McKinsey & Company did a study. It wasn't specific about Agile. It was just about general software development. They looked at large IT projects defined $15 million or larger. They found a couple of very key things. They found that over 40% of large IT projects fail. Other studies will say it's actually higher. I believe those other studies. But they said over 40%. 17% of those fail so bad they threaten the viability of the company. McKinsey, very naturally, defines successful projects as ones that are on time, on budget, and deliver the benefits that they promised at the beginning. Over 40% fail. So they wanted, this was a 2012 study, so they wanted to know how, what can we recommend to stop this from happening? And they listed 4 things. They never mentioned Agile. They mentioned waterfall, and they say don't do that, but they didn't mention Agile. The 4 recommendations are: focus on managing strategy and stakeholders instead of exclusively concentrating on budget and schedules. Managing the strategy is that sprint planning. It's working with the highest business value for, it's like, where are we going to take this product development? And manage your stakeholders. Show them what you're building. Get that feedback loop in. Don't be focused on schedules, your little project plan, your Gantt chart, and budget. That is an Agile principle. Their second recommendation is actually good for anything, is get really great talent. Completely agree. Doesn't matter what methodology you employ. Get good people and they will do great things. And stay out of their way if you're a leader. The third recommendation is build effective teams by aligning their incentives to the overall goal. You do that in Agile because you're asking people to come together and make commitments to each other. And then thank each other when there's success and celebrating the success. Right? Agile's first principle is delight the customer. If you want to be successful on an Agile team, you have to end up doing that. And you have an opportunity to get feedback on how you're doing that every 2 weeks or every sprint. That is an Agile principle. And their last recommendation is excel at core project management practices, such as short delivery cycles. Exactly. Here's another study done by the Standish Group. The Standish Group was founded in 1985 specifically to analyze IT projects, and also they do these studies and they offer their consulting services to make you successful. Right? So they did a very specific study of waterfall versus Agile. And what they found is 29% of waterfall projects fail, do not make time or budget or have the expected benefits, deliver on the expected benefits. And 14% succeed. Whereas Agile projects that they studied from 2002 to 2010, 42% succeeded. 3 times as much. So cake agility. I promised I would answer. What do these cakes have to do with? I am not a baker. I am a software guy. You know, I took maybe one class in my entire life on baking cakes. When I'm making a cake for one of my kids, I have an idea of what I want to do, whether it's Olaf from Frozen or whatever, the carousel. I'm not that good of a baker. So when I make a cake, I actually don't know what I'm going to get out of the oven. Is it going to be very spongy? Is it going to be very sturdy? There's actually engineering going on in here, which is, I think, why I enjoy it. There's engineering principles of how I construct these things. When I make my buttercream frosting, I don't know how stiff it's going to come out when I pipe it. I have no idea. I am dealing with a lot of uncertainty, and I have a timeline, because there's a party at the end, in which to deliver the cake. And so I use I go in accepting the uncertainty and constantly reevaluating what I'm going to deliver. So there's a link up there. Okay. So I told you, gave you a sense of what Agile is. Hopefully I've proven to you that it works, or at least the studies have. Now, how as leaders do you decide, do you lead a team to move to Agile? So one little, it's not trick, but something that I keep in mind whenever I deal with change is it's a challenge. All changes are a challenge. Challenges are neither good or bad, but it's something you have to deal with. And whenever you're presented with a challenge, you'll likely have to change something in order to be successful. In fact, in the word challenge is change. That's my little thing that I keep in my mind. So I'll show you another cartoon. It's all about change. Have you seen this? The caveman with the square wheels. Somebody presented, this is a better way of doing things. No, we're good. Thank you. I like doing what I'm doing. This is an incredibly important lesson that I had to learn in all those companies that I worked. People don't want to change. Even if you show them a better way of doing things, it is easier, it is preferred for people to continue to do what they're already doing, even if it's worse. And as leaders, you're going to face this kind of challenge over and over again. Just for completeness, because we live in a Lego world, I want to show you the Lego version of that. Same principle. In order to move a team to Agile, I'm first going to tell you what you need to transform, and then I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to do that. Okay? So, if you would, I'd like to do an experiment with you all. It's not going to hurt. Would you do an experiment with me? Okay, right. So if you have anything like in your lap, put it on the side. And I would like you to cross your arms. Sorry, Mr. Audio. Cross your arms. Okay, just cross your arms. Wonderful. Now, step 2 is notice, don't change anything, just notice which arm is above and which arm is below. Is your left arm above your right arm, or is your right arm above your left arm? Got it? Wonderful. Now, I'd like you to cross your arms in the other direction. Feels weird, huh? Kind of strange. Same result, right? Exactly the same result. But that felt weird. That's change. Whenever you present, it's funny, but it works. Whenever you present change to an organization, you have to understand that that's what they're going to go through. Even to get the same results, it feels strange. And if you recognize that from the beginning, you will be more successful at championing that change. So change is hard. This is not a course on change management. That too can be weeks and semesters of class and books. And I'm just going to focus on techniques that I've used specifically to move teams to Agile. And I've done it 3 times now. Move teams to Agile. And this is what I've done for it to be successful. The second thing that you have to transform in order to successfully move a team to Agile is to shift everyone's thinking from being date-based to being value-based. So here's the deal. People tell me, but Alan, Christmas is Christmas. It's not moving. It's December 25th. We have a product to deliver. Super Bowl is this date. A movie release is this date. Like it or not. Frozen's being released on Thanksgiving. Right? Agile recognizes that waterfall isn't going to get you there anyway. So if you have to make a choice between not making it and having nothing to deliver, or having something with the highest value to deliver, do that. So you need to shift the team, end-to-end cross-functional team, all the way from the business down to the developer, down to sales, marketing, from being date-driven to being value-driven. And the third thing you have to transform is it's not a command and control structure, it's a team-based structure that has been proven to be far more successful in product and software development. So how do you transform? As a leader, you have to create the space for change. You cannot force, if you're paying somebody salary, I guess you can usually force people, but that's not the way you want to do it. You're not going to get buy-in. You want to first create a space for change, and you do that by stating your intent to change. Stating your vision, explaining the value, what's in it for the company, what's in it for the team, and what's in it for every single person on your team. Everyone's going to eventually want to know what's in it for me. State your time frame. There are no goals unless you can state a time frame. It doesn't have to be a specific date, but state a time frame and be realistic about the time frame. And then also provide resources. When you're asking people to change how they do business, how they earn their livelihood, as a leader, don't just say, this is what we're doing, we're going to do it by this day, do it or you're fired, goodbye. It doesn't work. Provide resources. Are you going to provide coaching? Are you going to provide training? Are you going to provide pizza lunches so that people can interact and learn new? Just show that you're there and you're going to offer resources to help people change. And again, in terms of time frame, in terms of success, refrain from the illusion of certainty. The next thing, how do you shift everyone's thinking and focus from date-based to value-based? You have to demonstrate benefits for thinking this way. And you have to do so quickly. There's no specific prescription I can give you. Whatever the situation is that you're in product development, you have to look for quick wins, and you have to deliver on the quick wins. If you hand a salesperson a proof of concept that they can take to the market and have a customer play with, react, and give them more information, you've done something wonderful. If you can deliver something small that they can sell, you've done something wonderful. And you're proving out the fact that focusing on the value and not on the date is the better way to go. Once you start having success with these small wins, success breeds success. That's, by the way, why thanking your teammate in Agile every 2 weeks works. People want to feel good. They feel good, and somebody else wants that. And then, hey, then pretty soon the whole team feels good, and then other teams they're having fun, and they're delivering. How is that? Agile gives you an opportunity to engender that in the processes. Success breeds success. Absolutely key. And if you still encounter resistance, which you invariably will at some point in your careers when trying to implement change, what I do is just give it a chance. You don't believe it? Okay. These small successes, not important enough. Okay. I say give it a chance. Try it. If it doesn't work, we'll adjust. We'll change. We'll be agile about it. We will learn from it. But give it a chance, because you can't give me feedback unless you've tried it. That's what's worked for me. And then finally, how do you move from a command and control structure, which is the typical large company bureaucracy? Startups don't have this issue, but I don't know if all of you will end up in startups. How do you move from command and control to team-based? As a leader, you have to coach it. You have to model it. So where I work now, we're very matrixed and we're very non-hierarchical. A developer could go all the way up and talk to the CTO, who's my boss's boss. It doesn't matter. I can go talk to a manager 2 levels below me. It doesn't matter. We do not stand on principle. On hierarchy. We do stand on principle. Just not on hierarchy. It's very fluid. It's accepted that there's, anybody can talk to anybody. When you, as a leader, go and talk to the team, don't specifically call out an individual. Ask the team, are you all making your commitments? Because in Agile, you succeed as a team and you fail as a team. Is the team making commitments? Come talk to me anytime. Have an open door policy. And once people see that you welcome it, you encourage that kind of fluidity, they will learn. The final thing is be agile about being agile. Embrace the uncertainty of the change process. If you model it, people will see that, and they will model you. If you're open and standing on principle, people will see that you are practicing what you preach, that the entire change process can be run as an agile project itself. So, I hope you have a semblance of answers to these 3 questions. What is Agile? Why does it work? And some tips and tricks on how to move an organization to that. This is my contact information, my email, my Twitter, my blog. If you want to link in, I love LinkedIn, but I don't link in with anybody I don't meet. So if you want to link in with me, you have to come meet me. Thank you very, very much, and I would love to hear any questions if you have any.
We do have time for questions.
Do you actually have less meetings and maybe better meetings through this process? What is that like?
Yes, you actually have less of the traditional corporate meetings because everything that you need to do that's essential gets done in the stand-up. What did you do? You committed. You made certain commitments, right? What did you do in the last business day? What are you committing to do? Do you have any problems? If you have problems, you have another meeting right immediately after that to deal with the problem. In addition to that, you have the planning, so you have that every couple of weeks. You have a demo, it's just an hour, where you get to show off. And then you have the retrospective where the team gets together, right? Besides that, you don't have much meeting. You don't have any need to have too many more meetings because you're communicating every day with everyone. Other questions? Yes?
So a lot of methodologies can become dogma, and that's dangerous because then all you're doing is sort of following a prescribed set of rules rather than solving the problem. What do you do to avoid that with this set of
The question is, a lot of methodologies can become dogma where people just, they learn the process and then they just do the process and they forget why they're doing the process in the first place. So how do you avoid that from happening in Agile? It's built in. The teams are self-driven, self-organizing, and empowered to do anything, to do whatever they need to do. Within those four items, if people are new to the team or forget why they're doing that, you rely on a role called the Scrum Master, which I didn't get into. There's a lot more to Agile. But there is a particular role in Agile that the Scrum Master, the person that runs the daily 15-minute stand-up, they're the keeper of the principles, and they can remind people, this is why we're doing it. This is what, because after all, people forget why they need to tell what I did yesterday. I'll report. This is why. Because we're tracking, because change happens. So teams are allowed to go off and decide what the best way of doing things is. And usually when they are able to do that, each sprint or each new project, they come up with the way to do it. So it's more fluid than having just these are the rules, and you follow the rules and you forget why the rules are established. Does that answer your question? Great question. Other questions? Yes, sir.
You're looking for talent, team talent. How hard is it for you to find agile resources, people that have the experience that you're looking for?
I don't look for people who know Agile. I can teach Agile. That's not... In fact, if they're going to join my organization, they're going to have to do Agile. So the team will encourage them. Just right. I don't look for that. I look for, do they have a team player type attitude? Are they collaborative? Generally, when I hire, you can have a really brilliant person that does not work well with people, truly brilliant, that does not work well with people, or somebody who's really, really good that works really well with people. 98% of the time, I will take the latter. Somebody who's really, really good but works well with people, than somebody who's brilliant and doesn't. There are exceptions. There are always exceptions. Sometimes you have a particular kind of expertise that you need to hire, and sometimes all you have is somebody who's really brilliant and you have to massage that. But generally, I look for people who are team players who are there for a bigger purpose, and then the actual Agile stuff is easier to teach. Yes, sir.
About the Agile sprints, how would you go about making the time box of the sprint?
The question is, when in sprints, how would we pick the time frame?
Yeah.
Two answers. One is it's up to the team. The team will decide what they think their cadence should be, and then they can adjust it. If as a team they agree to adjust it, they may start off with 3-week sprints, and then say, you know what, we need to go 4 weeks, or we need to go 2 weeks. So the team actually decides. The second answer is, per the Agile manifesto, the shorter the better. Generally, the shorter the better. I mean, you can't do it in 2 days. Right? But you need some time. There are 1-week sprints, that's rare. What's most common are 2-week sprints, 2 to 3 week sprints. Yes, sir?
What are the situations in which Agile doesn't work?
What are situations that Agile doesn't work?
Right.
Next question.
Every project can be done in Agile.
No, not every project can be done in Agile. That is a great question. That's absolutely a great question. There are certain types of projects that don't work. That Agile isn't optimal. Let's say that. One kind is when you're rolling out packaged software. So if you roll out an ERP system, which I have done, I've rolled out Dynamics, I've rolled out Siebel. When you buy a package software like SAP, you are actually buying their expertise and their years of experience, right? So you're not there to really develop in the sense that Agile was built to do. You're doing configuration. You're doing integration. And so it's not the same kind of project when you're taking large package software. And that actually lends itself better to waterfall because you don't have that many requirements. You just have to configure. You just have to configure and integrate. So that's the easy answer. The grayer answer is very intelligent people have said that Agile works better once you have version 1. Once you get version 1 out the door, then Agile is beautiful because you're iterating on something that's already out there, you're getting feedback. But up to version 1, you got to make a date. There are ways in Agile of addressing that as well, and I'll let you know what that is. There's something called an MVP, the minimum viable product. Okay, and so the theory in Agile is that you're building something that can potentially ship each and every sprint. So the business can decide, stop, we're going to ship this, and you guys keep going, this is great. In reality, you need a certain amount of functionality, you need a certain amount of features before it's even worthwhile to bring to market. And that point is called a minimum viable product. The business and the technology leaders will get together and agree, yes, you need to have these. We have 150 requirements, but you need to have the first 34, otherwise don't bother. And so you can sprint plan, you can get an idea of when you'll have the 34 done. And if the business says, okay, we'll go with that date, great, rare, they always want it sooner. You negotiate, you say, okay, there are ways in Agile where you can do something called spikes, where you can have the team essentially work overtime to make a certain date so you can have a minimal viable product. And so my answer to that, to the second grayer area is, with the minimum viable product concept, I think even version 1 can be done really well in Agile. But there are always exceptions. Does that answer your question? Therefore, in my sprint planning of 2 weeks, I can realistically research 4 packages, and I need a couple of days to synthesize my findings and report back to the team. You make a commitment to do that in a 2-week period. You could be wrong. You could see in day 4, I'm still researching this work package. You know what, I thought it would take 2 days, but my research is taking longer. Okay. So the Scrum, you get into the daily meeting once you've discovered you can't make your commitment. You tell everybody, hey, I can't make my commitment. Everybody's like, that's cool, man, that's fine. How can we help you? The Scrum Master will ask you, well, do you have any blockers? Are you blocked by something? Is that why you're taking so long? And you might say, well, yes, I need to actually buy a license key. And then they go figure that out. Or you say, no, I was wrong, I misestimated in my sprint planning. And then it's like, okay, then you adjust. Then the Scrum Master would go to the business and say, we misestimated. We thought that we could, in this sprint, research 4 packages. It looks like we can only research 2. There's a number of ways of solving this problem. We can push the research. We can have more sprints that just do research, if you agree, Mr. or Ms. Business. Or we can just say, you know what, we don't need to research all 4. Just investigate these 2, good enough. Or some combination thereof. So you can absolutely do research. It's not so much the activity. Agile is about making the commitment and constantly checking in on that commitment with your team, being transparent about it, asking for help, and celebrating when you do make the commitment, and adjusting when you can't. Answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. I want to back. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you compared the Agile with waterfall model, right? What about other spiral model and incremental model?
So the question is, there are other methodologies. There's spiral model, there's rational unified process, if those of you are familiar with that. I haven't seen studies that have done that kind of comparison. I am not familiar with spiral. I am very familiar with rational unified process. I did RUP back when I was at IBM for years and years. Of all of the methodologies that I know of or have practiced, Agile is the one that gives you that constant feedback loop and gives you the ability to be flexible to the business needs. I haven't seen anything be as successful with respect to that. And remember, the number one idea, not just in Agile, but to be in business, is to delight the customer. If you are able to delight your customer, everything else will take care of itself. Right? So in order to delight the customer, sometimes you have to be extremely responsive. And there are other project methodologies that work. And in certain cases, like in packaged software, you do choose something else. I just found Agile to be the most successful. Yes, Miss?
I have a question. Thank you so much for coming today. I was wondering how you evangelize this concept to other divisions within Disney. What are some of the tangible steps that you're taking, and what has been the response?
So the question is, how do I evangelize Agile methodology in other parts of Disney, and what has been the response? Other parts of Disney are doing Agile already, so it's not so much evangelizing as comparing notes. Agile, when applied in a particular company and to a particular team for a particular work, is a little bit different. So I've done Agile multiple times. Like I've said, I've taken 3 teams, converted them to Agile. The resulting processes that we ended up with are slightly different. It's not the same. So even within Disney, we do Agile, but we don't all do it exactly the same. At times when I've had to evangelize, I talk about these things without a deck. It's usually over lunch. But I talk about, why, what processes do they follow, what doesn't work, this is why it works. I make myself available to talk to the team, to their teams, and I tell them, the developers get very nervous. I said, developers actually are usually the happiest at the end of the conversion process because they get the sense of empowerment that they don't get when they're told what to do by a project manager. Or even if they tell the project manager what the date is in another methodology, and then they're held to it, and then they find, I didn't make it. And then it's the end of the world. So in terms of evangelizing Agile in general, I just talk about the principles behind it and why it works better. Does that answer your question? Yes, sir.
Okay. I have a question about, is Agile scalable? My question about, because it works very well for a small team or group, but then to a very big program that you need several different teams to work together, and then because you embrace uncertainty to accumulate for different teams and then add it together, bubble up to be on the top, so the whole project will be extremely uncertain. So how does that work?
That's an excellent question. The question is, does Agile scale? Agile was optimized, this is correct. Agile was optimized for medium to small projects and medium to small teams. When you're in an enterprise, you have multiple of these teams that are interdependent. And so does Agile scale? That's a big question. So the quickest answer is Agile in and of itself, as it was conceived in 2001, doesn't exactly scale. But since then, there have been frameworks that have been built on top of Agile. And actually, what we do at Disney Studios, what we're about to embark on, is something called Scaled Agile, SAFE, S-A-F-E. If you go to scaleagileframework.com, you can learn about that. Because Agile doesn't talk about a number of key things. It works really well, but surprisingly, in the Agile Manifesto, it never mentions business roadmaps, or commitments, or QA, or architecture. Right? It has these principles and it has these ceremonies, but it doesn't actually talk about these other things that are really important, especially when you're interdependent and you're in an enterprise and you need to scale. And so there are approaches such as Scaled Agile or SAFE that take that into account and take some of the key principles and apply it to programs. So Agile is for a piece of software or a product, but you might have multiple products within a program. And within a program, you have investment themes at the top layer. So a business has multiple investment themes that might begat programs that themselves begat products that teams work on. And so you can apply some of these processes at each of these levels, but with different stakeholders. So the top level, investment themes, is almost all business folks and long-term strategy and roadmap ideas. And on the technical side, enterprise architects that are thinking about what's the technical strategy for how we're going to get the company there in the next 3 to 5 years. The level below that is a shorter time frame with product managers. And the level below that is the Agile that we've been discussing. And so Agile, as I described it purely tonight, is not as scalable, but there are answers today to help it scale to the enterprise, such as SAFE. Let me take a question there.
Yeah, you showed how some projects are managed in Project Manager and Gantt charts. Are there tools that you can use with Agile to hold people to commitments and other things like that?
Absolutely. Are there, what are the tools that one can use within Agile? There are plenty of tools, Rally, Jira. They give you these things called Scrum boards, where you have things called user stories. So user stories is the way you describe a requirement in Agile, and your user stories should, they don't always unfortunately, but should have acceptance criteria. How do you know that the developer or the product development person has hit the target? So you have this acceptance criteria. And so you have these Scrum boards where you almost like, if you think of Post-it notes, think of Post-it notes, a wall of Post-it notes. You write all the user stories on the Post-it notes. Then you have a sprint planning meeting where you take the high-value Post-it notes and move them to the next column of, we're committing to do this in this sprint. They get assigned, they get estimated, they get planned, they get assigned. And then when you're in the sprint, the people working on it report on it each day in that daily stand-up. And as they get done, and as they get ready for QA, you move it to the next column, move it to the next column. So there's electronic Scrum boards. In fact, at Disney Studios, we have these giant TV screens all over our building where we have different team Scrum boards visible. It's all about transparency. You're infinitely transparent when anyone can walk by a TV screen and see how your team is doing. That's exactly the point. We want to be transparent. We want to show people where we are because we're not afraid, in Agile, you're not afraid of asking for help. That's another, by the way, that's another key to failure. Is if you're afraid to ask for help, you're going to be in trouble. You're not going to deliver on time. Agile turns it on its head. Anyway, back to your question, which is the tools. So there's things like Rally and Jira and there's a tool, I forgot from Computer Associates, that give you a bunch of tools and dashboards. You have things called burn down charts in Agile, which is within a sprint, when a team's been together for X amount of time, you get a sense of how much they can deliver in a sprint. And you can measure that in workable hours or story points. I may be getting too detailed, so I'll bring it up in a second. But you have ways of measuring productivity. And you have a sense of, you have a target rate. Okay, we know that this team can do, 1,000 hours worth of work. Then you put your user stories in that have 1,000 hours worth of work in them. And then as the columns move, these tools track. And you can see, are you burning down to zero? So yes, there's lots of tools that we use.
Thank you.
Sure. One more call. Yes, sir.
Is Agile suited for global teams or is it more suited than the other?
Is Agile suited for, these are fantastic questions. Is Agile suited for global teams? A version of it. So one thing that I didn't talk about explicitly is that Agile is most successful when everyone is co-located. When everybody is in the same room and can look at each other. Because when you make a commitment to somebody, there's a connection there. Right? So, reality is, we are in a world, we are going much more global. And we are outsourcing and offshoring, and how do you do that? There's a couple of ways you can do Agile that I've done Agile successfully with global teams. One way, actually there's multiple ways, I'm just going to describe two of the best ways. You treat the entire global team as one person, and you have a representative who is physically with you. So if I have an offshore team in Pune and I have their coordinator local, they represent 500 hours of capacity. So the on-site person, it's representing 8 developers worth of capacity, reports on 500 hours worth of capacity each sprint. And they're in charge of the communication globally. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is they are their own Agile team, where you find user stories, you find tasks that they can do and run Agile locally. And you just sync up on a weekly basis or on a demo basis, or you stagger it, where the offshore team is working on a sprint, but their demo doesn't feed until the beginning of your next sprint. So they're working almost one sprint behind. That way, if you have dependencies, you can build off of that in your sprint, and you're free to go. There's actually several other ways, but you can absolutely do Agile with a global team. Most of the companies I've worked at have offshored and done Agile very successfully. I love these questions. So I'm around. Please contact me. Thank you again so much. It's been a true pleasure for me.